Namaste, this is the physicist, and we are going to do an easy derivation of the thin lens equation in this lecture. When it comes to the derivation of thin lens equation or proving the thin lens equation, for students, often it becomes confusing because there are approximations involved and there is a sign convention. There is a choice of sign convention between scholarly convention as well as the coordinate sign convention, and students often get confused in knowing when and how to apply these approximations and the convention. So first of all, let us talk about the sign convention and the approximations involved, and we can call them as the fundamental nodes. So if you are working along with this video, please make a note of these fundamental nodes. Okay. And first of all, I'll cover the sign convention. You don't use the scholarly sign conventions because there are a lot of things which you might forget, and that would cause you trouble. So always use the coordinate sign convention. Now let me write it down, that coordinate sign convention. When we talk about coordinate sign convention, there are basically three things that we need to understand. What are those? The three things that we need to understand here is, first, the all measurements are done from the origin. Okay, all the measurements are done from the origin. Okay, so basically if there is an x-axis and there is a y-axis, if there is an x-axis and there is a y-axis, and this is the origin, this is the positive direction of x and this is the positive direction of y, every measurement has to be done from the origin. So the first point of the measurement will be origin, and then you go from the origin to the left or to the right, to the to up or to down, and but all the measurements are taken from the origin. Okay, that's the first thing that you need to remember when it comes to coordinate sign convention. Okay, now let's go to the second part. The second point about coordinate sign convention is measurements along the positive direction of an axis is positive. Okay, measurements along the positive direction of an axis is positive, and here the second, of course, when you say that measurements along the positive direction of an axis is positive, it also means that measurements along the negative direction of an axis, whether it's x-axis or y-axis. So if it's along the negative direction of an axis, is negative. That measurement is going to have a negative value. Then point number 3 is the incident ray the incident ray is taken along the positive direction of the x x-axis. Okay, so these are the three things that you need to remember. So what the third point means is that the incident ray, first of all, the incident ray would be taken along the positive direction of the x-axis. So whether the incident ray is like this or the incident ray is like this, it will travel, or it travels along the x-axis itself. So the incident ray would follow the positive direction of the x-axis. Okay, it cannot, the incident ray cannot be taken like this. Okay, so whenever the incident ray is going backwards with respect to x-axis, you have to invert it, and your diagram should indicate that the incident ray it goes along the positive direction of the x-axis. Okay, so that is what the third point means. I will show how these things are getting applied in the process of derivation, but there are 3 points that you need to remember. Okay, for now, that's the coordinate sign convention. Now let's come to the approximation part. Luckily, for approximations, there are just 3 things. Okay, sorry, only 2 things. First of all the angles involved are very small when expressed in radians. Okay, not in degrees but in radians. Angles are expressed in radians, and also when expressed in radians, these angles have to be very small. That means whatever angle is, like if you express that in radians, they have to be very small. Why that is so, I will explain. And then number 2, first of all, angles involved are very small when expressed in radians. Number 2, the aperture of the optical interfaces are very small. That means the size of the lens or the size of the interface where refraction or reflection happens, that has to be very small. Only for these 2 approximations our derivation will work. Okay, and these are also applied when we derive the equation for the spherical mirror. But now, since we are going to derive the equation for the thin lens equation, so we have to follow these 2 approximations. Make a note of these, and you will understand how what these approximations mean and how we are going to apply them as we move on with the process of derivation. Okay, you have to set a principal axis to the situations. Okay, refraction at the spherical interface, we are going to find the expression for. Now need to understand that there has to be a principal axis and an aperture. This is the principal axis. This is the first thing that you need to draw in any optical diagram. Okay, principal axis. It is usually taken along the x-axis. Okay, that's the principal axis, and this is the interface. BOE is the optical interface. Mu1 is the index of the first medium, mu2 is the index of the second medium. We are assuming that mu2 is greater than mu1. That means second medium is denser, and in this setup, the point of intersection where the principal axis cuts the spherical interface at right angle is called the origin. We also can call it a pole, which is origin O. Since we are going to use coordinate sign convention, I am just taking it as O, as the origin. Okay. Now what happens? We are placing an object at A, and the image we are getting is at D. The first thing, after setting up the principal axis and the spherical interface, you are going to do a ray tracing. So for a ray tracing, you need to have 2 emergent rays and 2 intersecting rays, or apparently intersecting rays. Okay, for the image. From the object, take 2 emergent rays, the ray 1 and this is ray 2. Okay, the ray 1 goes from A, strikes the interface at B, then it gets refracted and moves along BD. Okay, now the second ray goes from A, emerges from A, hits the interface at O at exactly right angle, because by definition at O the principal axis cuts the spherical interface, optical interface at right angles, and since the angle of incidence is 0 because it hits at right angle, it goes along the same line and emerges like this. So this is ray 2 and this is ray 1, and since they intersect at D, D is taken to be the image. So at A we have our object, at D we have our image. I hope that part is clear. Now from the spherical interface at point B, I drop a normal to the principal axis at N from B. Okay, why do I do that? Because I am going to use trigonometry, and in trigonometry I need right angle triangles, so I dropped a normal N. However, N does not play much role in the setup here, because it's just a point which is not much involved in the actions and reactions. However, we are going to use the approximation that the aperture of the optical interface is very small. That means B is actually very close to A. So B is very close to A. As B moves, you can also do try to draw the diagram, subsequent diagrams, moving B closer and closer to O. As I keep moving B closer and closer to O, Bn will come closer and closer to BO. That means N will also move closer to O. Eventually at very small distance, BO is going to be the same as Bn. So when we derive our expressions for the right angle triangle, where the right angled vertex is at N, we can easily approximate that N is the same as O, and then we can generalize our expression. Okay, so that's why I have taken N, and now that I'm going to use the approximation that the apertures are small. Now there are angles also. When the incident ray AB strikes at B, there has to be an angle of incidence. To find the angle of incidence, we know that the spherical interface will have a radius of curvature R, and it will have a center. Let's say that the center is at C, which is the center of curvature. Now from C, if I draw a normal CB and extend it also further, I will see that this is the normal. Okay, this is the normal. Angle between the incident ray and the normal is the angle of incidence, which is I. And after the refraction, since it's a denser medium, the refracted ray would will pass closer, even closer to the normal. So this is the angle of refraction, which is the angle between the refracted ray and the normal, angle R. Okay, now in this setup we find other angles too. One angle is alpha, which is BAO, the other angle is beta, which is BCO, another angle is gamma, which is BDO. Okay, this angle. Now we are going to use this first approximation, which is all angles are small when expressed in radian. So how many angles we have? Alpha, beta, gamma, angle of incidence I, and angle of refraction R. They all tend to 0 radians. Not exactly 0, but very close to 0 in radians. Only then we are going to use the approximations to obtain an expression, an easy expression. Otherwise the expression is going to be very complicated. Right, so this is the first expression that we are using, which is the first approximation is all the angles, the 5 angles are close to 0 when expressed in radians. That's the first approximation. And the second expression is Bn. Second approximation is Bn is almost the same as Bo. Okay, that's the second approximation, and we're good to go. Right, we will be using the sign convention a little later. So first of all, let's find out the relationship between I and R. Okay, angle of incidence and angle of refraction. Now look at the triangle ABC. In triangle ABC, in this triangle, you see I is an X. Okay, let me draw the rough triangle like this. Okay, one second. This is the rough triangle. Okay, this angle is I, this angle is alpha, and this angle is beta. Okay, so in this triangle ABC, which is A, B and C, I is the exterior angle, and by the definition angle I is equals to alpha plus beta. That's basic geometrical deduction. Angle I is alpha plus beta. Why? Because angle I plus, let's call this angle I dash. I plus I dash is 1. If this angle is taken to be I dash, then I plus I dash is 180 because it's a straight line. But then I dash plus alpha plus beta is also 180 degree because all sum of the three angles of a triangle is 180. So I dash plus I is 180, I dash plus alpha plus beta is 180. That means I is the same as alpha plus beta, which we summarize as the exterior angle of a triangle is equal to the sum of the two farther interior angles. Okay, so I is alpha plus beta. We got that first expression. Similarly, in the triangle here, the other triangle, you can see that in the triangle BCD, in the triangle BCD, in the triangle BCD, okay, BCD, we can see that the exterior angle is beta. So beta will be equal to the sum of the farther interior angles, which are what? R and R, gamma. So beta is equals to R plus gamma. That means if we need to find an expression for R, R is equals to beta minus gamma. Okay, so R is beta minus gamma. We mentioned that here R is the same as beta minus gamma. Okay, now we know that when we use the Snell's law for diffraction, we know that mu1 sin I is mu2 sine of R, right? That's the Snell's law. This thing comes from Snell's law. Snell's law, right? Now we don't know what sin I is because sin I is a ratio. Similarly, sin R is also a ratio, but we know that I is small, R is very small, and for small angles, any small angle theta, for any small angle theta, that means when theta in radians tends to 0, sine of theta is approximately the same as theta. Okay, sine of theta is approximately the same as theta. That means sine of I is approximately the same as I, and sine of R is approximately the same as R. Okay, so sine of I is the same as sine R, sine of I is the same as I, sine of R is same as R. That means we can rewrite the Snell's law again here as mu1. So we are rewriting the Snell's law here as mu1 sine I. Instead of sine I, we can write it as I is equal to mu2 R. Instead of sine R, we just write R. Now we know that I equals to alpha plus beta and R equals to beta minus gamma. We just put those things here. So mu1 times alpha plus beta, and on the right hand side we write mu2 times beta minus gamma. Right, mu2 times beta minus gamma. Right, all we have to do is to now expand both the sides. We just write as mu1 alpha mu1 alpha plus mu1 beta is equal to mu2 beta minus mu2 gamma, right? And then we rearrange. Okay, how do we rearrange this? We rearrange that there are two beta terms. Okay, so we take this beta term to this side and bring this gamma terms to this side. That means mu1 times alpha plus mu2 times gamma is mu2 times beta minus mu1 times beta. Taking beta common, we get mu2 minus mu1 times beta. So let us write the final expression here. Mu1 alpha plus mu2 gamma. The expression that we have got is mu1 alpha plus mu2 gamma is mu2 minus mu1 times beta. Okay, right. So that is our expression here. This expression we have to now use some further approximations so that we can make sense of this expression. Okay, make a make a proper formula out of it. Okay, and we know that by in our usual optics we use that image distance, or rather object distance. These are the terms that we use: object distance, object distance, object distance as u, and we use image distance as v. Okay, we use object distance as u and we use image distance as v. Okay, and we have the radius of curvature is r. We know that we use radius of curvature for the interface as r, and we use focus for focus we use f. So we use all those things. Now we are going to introduce these symbols, these notations u, v, r and f wherever and however possible into this expression here. Okay, but there is one more thing, another thing that we have to perform here, that in the we have to understand what alpha, gamma and beta actually mean in this particular triangle. Now look at the triangle ABN. In triangle ABN, so in triangle ABN, when there is the angle alpha, tan alpha is given as Bn upon An. Okay, tan alpha is given as Bn upon An. And now we are going to use two more approximations again, where alpha is very small. When alpha tends to 0, then tan alpha tends to alpha also. Okay, so tan alpha tends to alpha. And then we have also used the approximation that the aperture is very small. That means Bn is approximately the same as Bo. If Bn is approximately the same as Bo, again n, when B approaches O, n also approaches O. That means An is also approximately the same as AO. Correct? So by using these approximations, we can say that alpha is the same as BO upon AO. So alpha is the same as BO upon AO. Okay, BO upon AO. Correct? Now what is AO? BO, we don't know how we can further make sense of BO, so let us leave BOO as it is. But we know that AO is the from the pole. If this is the pole and we are measuring from O to A, we call AO, but it is actually OA. So what is that? That is the object distance, which is supposed to be U. However, the measurement we are doing is from O to A, which is along the negative x-axis. So OA is minus of U, minus of object distance. So this is minus of U. So alpha, instead of alpha, what we can write is alpha is alpha is minus of BO upon U. Okay, that is what alpha means. And here in this expression, in this equation, we can write this as, we'll keep on plugging this, mu1, or rather we'll put minus mu1 alpha is BO upon U. Okay, we have shortened this particular term in this equation. Okay, now let us find gamma. What about gamma? If we go again and find the right angle triangle where gamma is there, so the triangle would be BND. In the triangle BND, tan gamma, what is tan gamma? Again, BN upon DN. Okay, but then gamma is also very small, so tan gamma will be approximately equal to gamma, and that is, again, when we talk about BN, for B approaching O, BN is the same as BO. We will keep BO as it is, divided by, what is DN? DN is the same as DO or OD. Okay, because N is approximately the same as O, so ND or DN is the same as OD. Okay, but here what is OD? From O to D, it is the image distance, and when we take it from O to D, we are going in the positive x-axis. Okay, so OD is the image distance, so gamma is BO upon image distance is V. Okay, so we can plug the value of gamma in the equation. Gamma is BO upon V. So we write plus mu2 times gamma is BO upon V, and then we'll move on to the right hand side where it is mu2 minus mu1 times beta. Again, take the triangle in which the angle is beta, so that is the BNC, the triangle BNC. So let me just erase this part here and write the triangle BN. In triangle, which one? BNC. BNC. The same process again. tan of beta is Bn upon Nc, Bn upon Nc. Now in the left hand side we use the small angle approximation. That means tan beta is approximately the same as beta, and then Bn will be approximated as Bo and Nc will be approximated as Oc. But keeping Bo as it is, what is Oc? From the pole or the origin to C, it is the radius of curvature of the spherical interface, right, R, and we are measuring it from O to C. Again, we are following the same positive x axis, positive x direction, so it is going to be as such, Bo upon R. So beta is Bo upon R. So beta is Bo upon. Now you see BO can be cancelled from both LHS and RHS. That will give us a much more compact equation, and since this term is negative, we can first term we can keep it as positive. We keep it as mu2 upon V minus mu1 upon U is mu2 minus mu1 upon R. Okay, so that's the usual expression. Mu2 upon V minus mu1 upon U is mu2 minus mu1 upon R, and we have already used the sign convention properly, so this equation fits all situations. So that is the equation for the refraction at the spherical interface, and that was the hardest part. The easiest part, let's go and apply the same formula to the thin lens equation now. Alright, now for the thin lens equation, now let's understand the setup for the thin lens equation. I have drawn this lens in blue as very thick, but only to clarify things. Okay, you can pause and look at the diagram in detail, but this is I'm going to explain how it happens. In the thin lens equation, there are two interfaces. One is the left for the first one, for which the center is at C1, and for the second, okay, this is the C1 for the first interface, because the incident ray from A strikes the left interface at B, then it bends and goes through BC. At C it again gets refracted and travels along CD, and where you get the final image. Okay, so A is the object. At A there is the object, at B there is the final image. The surrounding medium is mu1, okay, and the lens medium is mu2. Now the trick is break these the two incidences as two cases. First, forget that there is a second interface. So this is the interface 1 and this is the interface 2. Forget that the interface 2 is there. If there was no interface 2, what will happen? The incident ray will travel along A to B, get refracted and travel along BC. The incident ray will one of the incident rays, actually the other one goes past goes through the principal axis. Okay, the second incident ray goes through the principal axis because it hits both the interfaces at right angle, so there is no deviation. Okay, we don't have to worry about the second ray. The first ray goes from A, hits at B, then follows BC. Only because of interface 2 it further gets diffracted and goes from C to D. Okay, but if the interface 2 were not there, what would happen? After the first refraction, the same ray BC will keep traveling along BCE and somewhere hit the principal axis at E, and at E there will be an intermittent image, okay, for the first refraction. However, there is interface 2. So we can assume that first there was no interface 2, but after the image formation at E, which is the intermittent image, there comes interface 2. That means the image at E is nothing but a virtual object. It's an object for interface 2, and because of that the final image is getting formed at D. Okay, so you can break this thing as into two parts. Instead of looking at this lens as it is, just look at two cases. First, there is medium mu1 and there is medium mu2. First medium is mu1, second medium is mu2. Incident ray comes from medium 1, hits at B, gets refracted and follows its path BCE in medium 2. That's it. So single surface refraction. Again, instead of having the two interface, interface 1, 2 and then back to 1, sorry, medium 1, medium 2, which is the lens, and then back to medium 1. What you can do, you can take at medium 1 and 2 and then take medium 2 and 1. Second case will be the object is at E, that is already in the medium mu2. Okay, here in this case the medium, first medium is mu2 because we are we're looking at E that would have been formed had there not been the second interface. If there is no second interface, then medium mu2 will be in continuation. So at image, which is the intermittent image E, the intermittent image E becomes the object for the second refraction. So the incident ray again goes from medium 2, hits at C, and then you just reverse it like this. Okay, it goes from E, hits at C, and then somehow it makes the final image. Actually, the when you say the virtual object, intermittent image becomes the virtual object. When you use virtual object, that means the ray that would have actually met at E would actually gets bent again. Okay, so in that case the virtual, you don't have to worry about the virtual object, how the images are formed. The easiest way to understand is that the virtual object actually never forms. Okay, that is why you call it a virtual object. It never forms. The intermittent image would have formed had there not been an interface at 2. Okay, had this second surface not been there. Okay, but it is there. That means instead of forming the image at E, the ray would further bend and meet the principal axis at D, where the final image would be there. Okay, but we can see it like this, that the image, the virtual object is an object, and because it is in medium mu2, the incident ray somehow is in mu2, it gets refracted at C and meets the final image at D. Okay, so here the medium, instead of taking the first medium as mu1, the first medium will be mu2 and the second medium will be mu1. Now it's very easy, we can use our notations again. We use object distance as U, image distance as V. For the virtual object, let us call it as V dash. Okay, we call that virtual object or virtual image, that distance. And again we use R1 for curve 1 and R2 for interface 2. This as a for just as we have taken for the interface 1, the center is at C1, and interface 2, for interface 2 the center is at C2. And when we call the this as a thin lens, what actually we mean is that there is another approximation that here the interface cuts the interface 1 cuts the principal axis at A, so that should be the origin. But then interface 2 cuts the principal axis at G, that also should be the origin, but we can have only one origin. So what we do, we take their average at the center O. And since it's a thin lens, very thin lens, so OF distance and OG distance, they are very small. So we can assume that F is approximately the same as O. Also G is approximately the same as O. So all measurements will be taken from the average origin, which is O. Right? Now, for the first refraction at C, we know that for the single surface refraction, the equation is mu2 by V minus mu1 by U is mu2 minus mu1 by R. We have already derived that equation. Now for the single surface refraction at interface 1 on the left hand side, for this interface, it's very easy. We take mu2 as it is, because mu1 here means the first medium, mu2 means the second medium. So we keep everything as it is, mu2 by V minus, okay, first of all, what we mean by V, what is V here? In the first refraction, if I go back, the first refraction at the first interface, the image is not formed at D, it is formed at E, which is the virtual image or the intermittent image, okay, or rather in that case it is the intermittent image, okay. The intermittent image is never formed, but we are just assuming that if the second interface were not there, then the image would have been formed at E, okay, and we take that image distance as V dash, okay. So in this case it will be V dash, mu2 upon V dash, mu2 upon V dash minus mu1 upon U. The same original object is still there, which is equal to mu2 minus mu1 by R. What are the first spherical interface that has a curvature R1? So this is our first equation. For the second refraction, okay, for the second refraction, what we can do, what we know is that the first medium is mu2, okay, and the image is being formed in mu1. So what we can do, again, the first medium is here, the first, so what was mu2 in the first case, that becomes mu1, and what was mu1, that becomes mu2, okay. So we just change, so instead of mu2 we write mu1, and instead of V dash we know the image distance is V, because that's where we are getting the final image, right? So here what we mean by the image distance by the refraction at 2 image is the actual image, which is the final image, okay. So and that has the image distance V. So, and since it's the reverse case, the second medium is the first medium, so we write it as mu1. The second medium is mu1, instead of mu2 we write mu1, and instead of mu1 we write mu2, because the first medium is mu2, it's here. And then what is U? U is supposed to be the object distance, but for the refraction at the second surface, here again I'll take you back to the image, for the refraction at the second surface, okay, what happens to the object distance? It's the virtual object, which is at a distance what? V dash. You will say that, sir, the V dash is supposed to be from G, okay. V dash is supposed to be from G. No, we are approximating F and G to be almost the same as O. So we are measuring all the distances from O. That means whether it is U, V, R1, R2, V dash, all of them are from O. So the object distance here is the virtual object distance, which used to be the image distance for the first refraction, what that was V dash, okay. So we put here, instead of object distance U, we write it as V dash, and we write, instead of mu2 minus mu1, we write mu1 minus mu2, because here what was the first medium in the first case now has become the second medium, and the second medium of the first case now has become the first medium, and the radius of curvature is at the second spherical interface that has a curvature R2, and that is our second equation. Now all you have to do is just add these two. You just add these two equations, add the left hand sides and add the right hand sides. When you add these two equations, mu2 upon v dash minus mu2 upon v dash, these two terms cancel out, and you can write it as mu1 upon v, the left hand side, mu1 upon v minus mu1 upon u. Now the intermittent image distance or object distance v dash has been cancelled, and we have the actual terms now. So mu1 upon v minus mu1 upon u is equal to mu2 minus mu1 by r1 plus, you can write mu1 minus mu2, mu1 minus mu2 upon r2, right? After we add these two equations, now you can, on the left hand side, again you can take mu1 as the common factor and write it as 1 by v minus 1 by u, and on the right hand side again mu2 minus mu1, here it is mu1 minus mu2, which is minus of mu2 minus mu1, so you can take mu2 minus mu1 as the common factor, and inside the second parenthesis we can write 1 by r1, and here if you take mu2 minus mu1 common as a factor from mu1 minus mu2, then you are going to be left with minus 1. It's going to be minus 1 by r2. So now to further simplify this, what you can do, you can divide both the sides with mu1, divide both the sides with mu1, so that you can have 1 upon v minus 1 upon u is the same as mu2 minus mu1 upon mu1, and in this term we write 1 by r1 minus 1 by r2. So this becomes your thin lens equation. Sometimes what we do is we write the second term. Okay, first of all, if the image, okay, if your thin lens is like this, okay, and this is the principal axis, paraxial rays travel from infinity parallel to the axis. Whenever parallel rays rays parallel to the principal axis are incident on a lens, the emergent rays pass through the focus, so the object distance is nothing but the focal distance. So v becomes f, right? And then for paraxial rays, the object appears to be at infinity, so u becomes infinity, so 1 by u tends to be 0. That means for paraxial rays we can write this as for paraxial rays v becomes focal length f and u tends to be infinity. So if then in that case, if we apply the thin lens equation, what do we get? We get 1 by f minus 1 by u is 0, because u is infinity, minus 0 is mu2. If I simplify this as mu2 minus mu1 by mu1, it becomes mu2 by mu1 minus 1 times 1 by r1 minus 1 by R2. And that, if I just write it in a simple way, then 1 by F so 1 by F is mu2 by mu1 minus 1 times 1 by R1 minus 1 by R2, and that gives you the focal length of the lens. Okay, and you can easily write with the expression for the focal length. You can write the lens equation, thin lens equation, as 1 by V minus 1 by U is 1 by F. Okay, either you can write this as the equation, this particular equation, let us call this equation 3, this particular equation as the thin lens equation, or you can write it as equation 4, thin lens equation 4, where you have to mention what 1 by F means. You have to give equation 5 as an addendum to express that 1 by F means mu2 upon mu1 minus 1 times 1 by R1 minus 1 by R2. Okay. Now, in most of the cases when we use lenses, we use air as the medium, air as the first medium. That means mu1 for air is 1, because air has a refractive index 1, and whatever the material are we using for the lens, mu2 for the lens material, let us call that just N. Okay, whatever it is, let's call that N. So what happens is, if we write the equation, again the same thing, the equation will be 1 by V minus 1 by U equals to 1 by F, but 1 by F becomes mu2 by mu1. Mu2 is N, mu1 is 1, so becomes N minus 1 times 1 by R1 minus 1 by R2. Okay. And since by definition for a lens power P is 1 by F, power P is 1 by F, right? So power is also given as N minus 1 times 1 by R1 minus 1 by R2, expressed in inverse of meter or meter inverse. Because focal length is in meter, 1 by F is meter inverse, we also call it diopter D. Okay, D for diopter, right? And I think this actually completes the derivation. I have given you some important information also throughout this video. If you further have any questions, use the link to ask your questions. I'm providing the link where you can ask your questions. If you want serious answers, then you visit the link that I'm going to give you. Just don't put your comment in the YouTube, because under YouTube I will not be able to give you a detailed answer. It does not support any mathematical equations, it doesn't support pictures. So use the link that I'm going to give you in the description as well as at the end of this video. So that will be all. And I think this, if you have worked along with me, then you would have understood it pretty well, and if you have made notes, then that would have been much better. And thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one.